Hi, I'm Dave Annell. Welcome to the 11th episode of Setting the Record Straight. Today, I want to look at a particular aspect of accessing census returns. Online access has opened up the censuses and massively increased our chances of finding our ancestors in the returns. If, like me, you remember trying to find people in the pre-digitisation age, you'll know how difficult it could sometimes be. Both Ancestry and Findmypast are quite reasonably geared towards finding individuals, but there are any number of reasons why your search might fail to turn up the person or the family that you're looking for, and a failed search should really be the start of your journey rather than the end. It's also worth bearing in mind that not everyone's looking for individuals. Local historians, social historians, economic historians, students of demographics need to be able to access the returns by place. And it's this concept that I want to explore today, namely that there are other ways of accessing the censuses. I should emphasise that I'm dealing with census returns for England and Wales here, and I'm not going to include the 1911 or 1921 censuses because they're both a little bit different. Ancestry and Findmypast have highly flexible search engines, allowing you to search their databases in a variety of imaginative and interesting ways. This goes a great distance towards making up for their sometimes, let's say, disappointingly poor standards of transcription. This is something which I'm sure I'll come back to in future episodes of Setting the Record Straight. So there are different ways to search the census returns other than by name. On both websites, you'll see a range of additional fields that you can use. It's really important to note that you don't have to put anything at all in the name fields. So this is the range of fields available on the Findmypast search. And on Ancestry, there's similar, much smaller range of fields, but there are other areas that you can search on. Now, the layout and the terminology used with these additional fields is a little bit confusing. For example, on the Findmypast, we have birth town and birthplace. Now, quite what the difference is between those two isn't immediately obvious. But with a bit of trial and error, you should be able to work out what the impact is of using each of these fields. I'd probably use the keyword field. It's called optional keywords in Findmypast and just keyword in Ancestry. I'll probably use that field more than any other. Again, something else I plan to explore further in a future episode. Back in the old days, the only way we could access the censuses, unless we were lucky enough to discover that a local family history society had indexed the returns for their area of interest, was by address. Effectively, we needed to know where the family were living before we could search for them. Without going into too much detail, there were quite different solutions depending on whether your people were living in urban or rural areas. You started with a place list for the census year that you were interested in, and this led you via a couple of steps to the relevant microfilm, and if one existed, directed you towards a street index. Street indexes were produced over the years by PRO staff and covered all the larger towns and cities. For reasons which I hope are obvious, tracking people down in London was always particularly difficult, but the street indexes produced for London were of a particularly high standard of accuracy and detail. They were largely the work of a wonderful man called Joe Saunders, who used contemporary maps, post office directories, electoral registers, and the old-fashioned process of actually going out and walking the streets with his notebook in hand. It really was a labour of love for Joe. The street indexes, along with a range of other census finding aids, were available on the shelves at the census reading rooms in Portugal Street, then Chancery Lane, and then at the Family Records Centre. And they even moved to Kew when the FRC was closed down in 2008. In fact, they are still there at Kew, but you have to go right to the very back of the library on the first floor into a little quiet area to find them. Back in 2007, a project was launched to make the census street indexes available online. It was part of a bigger project called the Historical Streets Project, which was itself part of a project called Your Archives. Sadly, all of this was abandoned in 2012, but the web pages have been archived on the National Archives' own web archive. The site is a little bit unstable and you do occasionally experience some problems accessing parts of it, but when it's working properly, it's a fantastic resource. The street indexes for 1841, 1851, 1861, 1871 and 1891 are all available, covering, as I said, the larger towns and cities in England and Wales. So let's have a look at how we might use these street indexes in practice. This is, of course, assuming that you've exhausted all the options for searching by name, but that you know, or you're fairly sure that you know, where the family that you're looking for were living at the time. You might have this address from a trade directory or perhaps from an earlier census return, or best of all, you might have got your evidence from a roughly contemporaneous birth or death certificate. And I say best of all because this is where there's some good news. The administrative system used for registering births and deaths was exactly the same as the system used for taking the census. They both used the same hierarchy of registration districts and sub-districts. The census also used another level, the enumeration district. But the point is that if you had an address on a birth certificate recorded as the place of birth for one of your ancestors, the registration district and sub-district recorded on the certificate would tell you which registration and sub-district the census returns for that address would appear in. Of course, there were changes to the districts over the years, but that one-to-one relationship between the two types of records was one of the few things that we had going for us when it came to the task of finding the people that you were looking for in the census. Let's take this birth certificate, for example. It's the birth of a man called Henry Frederick Dennett, and he was born on the 12th of July, 1850 at 16 Seabright Street, Bethnal Green. If we look at the top of the certificate, we'll see that it was registered in the Bethnal Green Registration District and the sub-district of Hackney Road. So turning to the Historical Streets Project website, we go to the list for 1851. We scroll down to Bethnal Green, which is down here. And then we're looking for Seabright Street. So we're going to go to this section here, P to S. And then we'll scroll down until we find Seabright Street. And in fact, we'll see that it looks like there are two different Seabright Streets in Bethnal Green. But this is probably the one we want to look at because it says Hackney Road. So we need to note down these references, HO 107 1539, and these are the folio numbers 577 to 580 and 588 to 591. TNA documents usually, it's not always the case, but usually have a three-part archival reference. The department code, so in this case, HO for Home Office, the series number, in this case 107, and a piece number here 1539. Then to find the correct place in the document, you need some further reference, which in the case of the census returns is a folio number, and it's the number which is stamped at the top right hand of every second page. Here we need to look at folios 577 to 580 and 588 to 591. Incidentally, if you're giving the full TNA archival reference for a census entry, you should also include the page number. And in the case of the 1841 census, there's an additional level, the book number, but let's not worry too much about that for now. So what we want to do now is to find the 1851 census returns for 16 Seabright Street, Bethnal Green, using the details that we just got from the Historical Streets website. So on the Ancestry 1851 database, we'll scroll down and we'll go to the piece field there in 1539. The folio, for some reason, is up above there. I want to put in 577, and then we're going to search from there. So let's just click on search. This will take us to some entries for that section. If we just view that, we're on folio 577, and we want to scroll through looking for 16 Seabright Street. We can see at the bottom there, we've got number 1 Seabright Street. And if we keep on going, we'll find other entries for Seabright Street. And this goes up to number 9, then up to number 14 there. And then we've got some random numbers. We've got another number 1 and number 2. We've got 10A and 11. So the numbering is obviously a little bit all over the place. This goes up to number 14, and then we go on to another road. So we need to go back and search this second section. So we want to search, instead of 577, we want to start in 588 and run that search. Again, we'll jump in there and see where we are. We've got Seabright Street here, 2220. And then on the next page at the bottom, we can see number 16 Seabright Street. And there is the Dennett family that we're looking for. And the person whose birth certificate we saw there, he is as Henry Dennett, on the second page there, aged 8 months. So we can do that on Ancestry. There is on Findmypast an address search, and you can use that and it can work, but let's just run it here. 1851 census I've selected in Seabright Street. We'll see that there are 165 households listed there, and no numbers are shown here, no house numbers. So it would take a lot of effort to go through all that. And we could do it that way, but I would actually prefer to go to the database here, the 1851 database. And we'll do the same thing as we did on Ancestry. It's a little bit more logical place here, 1539, and we can jump straight to 588 here because we know it's in that section now. We'll view those results, same process, just view the image, click on to the next page, and there we have the entry that we're looking for, George Dennett and family. So it's not easy, but you can get there. It is possible to search the census by place, and sometimes that might be the only way that you're going to find your people. Thanks for watching this episode of Setting the Record Straight. I'll put some links in the comments and I'll be back with more soon. Thank you.